President Trump understands that if Iran continues to govern and this regime continues to take control, there is no way to get not only agreements with them, but there is no way to curb the malign activity all over the region, putting at risk American interests. This is not just the oil that is coming from the Middle East. There's a much larger American a set of interests that have to do with the power competition with China, for instance. I think President Trump understands very well that if the United States is not trustworthy in any part of the world, the Chinese will try to creep in and gain this. President Trump decided that the war starts, and President Trump will decide when the war ends.
Hello and welcome to the Krauss Report. We're in the middle of the second week of the operation against Iran led by Israel and the United States, and we just received a first signal from President Trump that he might be ready to end the war. It came after the rise in oil prices, and he's now saying that the war may be getting close to the finish line. It is not yet clear when or how this will end, but one thing is quite clear. If the war ends without regime change, then the number one goal will not have been achieved. I've interviewed President Trump 3 times since the operation started, and we spoke yesterday about Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the former Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who was assassinated. This week, he was officially named as the next Supreme Leader of Iran, the new Supreme Leader of Iran. I asked President Trump about him, and he said that it's going to be tough for him to last, that it's not going to be easy for him, essentially warning him. Today, I'm hosting Israel's former National Security Advisor, Eyal Hulata. He's been researching Iran and studying Iran in the past 25 years. He knows so much about Iran. He was in the secret discussions in Israel about possible operations in Iran, and he knows everything there is to know about their nuclear program and their leadership. He can't share everything, but he knows so much, and you can get a glimpse during that conversation into what's really going on behind closed doors, behind the scenes. Eyal Hulata, former Israel's National Security Advisor and current Senior Fellow at FDD. Welcome to the Krauss Report. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Neria. It's very good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Sure. I think you're one of the biggest experts on this issue that can actually speak because you're not currently in the office. So I wanted to, first of all, hear your thoughts. We're in the middle of the second week of this operation. So far, very successful operation, taking down Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, on the first day. And since then, a lot of attacks, both from the U.S. and Israel, on Iran. Can you tell me what are your thoughts as a person who was there in the secret discussions about this option of acting against Iran?
This is a very significant phase and unique. Of course, we have to talk about the context of a broader time frame as we look at Iran. This actually started in April 24 when Iran decided to fire directly in Israel. I think many of the things we see now wouldn't have happened if Iran didn't decide to go for it back then. And then, of course, the erosion of Hezbollah capabilities, another direct round from Iran in October of 24. And then when the 12-day war come, which I think was a huge success by way of degrading, pushing back, almost eliminating the Iranian nuclear program to a point where there is, in fact, zero enrichment in Iran for the last 8 months. Not a single centrifuge has been spinning and enriching uranium in Iran. So when we get into this phase right now, basically a decision, first and foremost, by President Trump to respond to the wave of protests that happened just 2 months ago. I mean, exactly 2 months ago. We're recording this on March 9th. January 9th was the middle of the huge massacre that the Iranian regime did to its own people. Dozens of thousands of people were killed, slaughtered, murdered, either in the streets and then in the hospitals, and crushing protest for freedom and for rights. So we have to look at what we see now in this. It's unique, I think, in several ways and forms. The first is the objective. President Trump was very clear with the objectives. A few hours after this started, came out with a recorded message saying that the intention is to create conditions for the people of Iran to take over, to not only to protest, but to succeed in changing the regime of Iran. We don't usually hear things like that. Israel, for the first time in its history, eliminated a leader of an enemy country. I mean, we did this to commanders or leaders of terror organizations.
Like
but never
Sinwar,
like
the
Sinwar,
commander
like
of the
Nasrallah,
October
like
7th
Hania.
attack. Yeah.
Definitely. And also, when we go back, Abbas Musawi of Hezbollah and others in the past, but never a leader of a country, even when it's an enemy country. And the reason this happened was because this indeed, in fact, is a joint campaign or operation, US and Israeli. It was President Trump who decided to go ahead and to take down the supreme leader. The fact that Israel did the kill is because of, I will say, in the context of this podcast, maybe technical legal constraints of Title 50 and Title 10 and what the United States is allowed and not allowed to do. Israel has less constraints, but it was President Trump. And the reason we know that is because in the 12-day war, when this idea was raised, President Trump said, absolutely not. You're not taking down the supreme leader. That was the reporting, at least. And here we have the initial strike of the campaign was that. So this is a different mindset in Washington. This is a different mindset in Jerusalem. And to your point, I think so far it's going well. I mean, the operational gains are significant. Taking out the elimination not only of Supreme Leader Khamenei, but all of his surrounding or many of his top-ranking officers and advisors. The missile capabilities are on the decline. We know this because even if we have a lot of siren in Israel, and we do, there are far less missiles and far less effective in their impact. There are Gulf countries who are suffering more from Iran at the moment than Israel. Remember,
Yeah, we'll need to
Emirates.
talk about that in a moment because I'm sure you have a lot of people on the ground that
Yeah.
you know, connections of senior diplomats there. So we'll talk about that in a minute. I want to talk about Khamenei a little bit more because I think it takes a lot of courage, right? When you were in office, have you ever considered taking down the supreme leader of Iran, having known that they're dangerous for the free world, for the Western world?
You know, I can't answer that question. But what was certain
I
throughout.
tried.
Yeah, you did, and very nicely and politely. What was very eminent throughout the times was that we knew that this was not in the cards. This was not something that was relevant in the sense that it was clear that whoever the president of the United States was, Biden before Trump, even Trump won, Obama for sure, but also Bush. I mean, we've been dealing with Iran I've been dealing with Iran for 25 years now. It was very clear that there are things that are not done in this context, that leaders are not a target, that oil or energy sector is something to be very nuanced when we do strike it, not to crush or to alter the global oil market as a whole. And this is different now. I think President Trump made a sound decision that he wants real change in Iran. He's consistent in this regard. He had a real change in Venezuela in different means and terms. And I think that there is something very serious about his ambition and intention to reshape the world in general, but definitely the adversaries of the United States, in this case, adversary of the United States and also of Israel.
And when you look at this administration, you lived in Washington, D.C. for a while. You're now in Israel, by the way, if the alarms are going off. As we saw on CNN while you went live with Erin on an interview, you were very calm, by the way, on this interview while the sirens are going off.
You know, I mean, we get these alarms a lot. The only thing that is important to do when this happens is to follow the rules and the instructions that were given. We have time, so we didn't need to rush it. And there was a camera there. And this is Aaron Burnett. So there was no chance I will get nervous too much. I had to keep calm in this context. But just to go to a safe place and wait, that's all we can do. Israelis are resilient and disciplined. And this is what we do. When people don't do it, by the way, they get hurt, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But if you follow the instructions, that's the way it is.
Yeah. So you lived in Washington, D.C., and you're a part of the FDD. What do you think makes this administration so special, or this president so special, that they had basically the guts and also the understanding that that it needs to happen?
I think what's unique about this term, this presidency, is that the president of the United States acts as if he understands that time is really of the essence, and there is no time to waste, and there is very little reason to go about problems, beating about the bush, just waiting until things will happen. Even though people look at the movement that he created in the Republican sphere, right? The Make America Great Again. And there are some isolationist factions within that group. President Trump is not an isolationist. President Trump is I would say a committed interventionist when it comes to United States interests. And in this case, it's a joint U.S. and Israeli interest, but I think he acts upon it because it's an American interest, because President Trump understands that if Iran continues to govern and this regime continues to take control, there is no way to get not only agreements with them, but there is no way to curb the malign activity all over the region, putting at risk American interests. This is not just the oil that is coming from the Middle East. There's a much larger American a set of interests that have to do with the power competition with China, for instance. I think President Trump understands very well that if the United States is not trustworthy in any part of the world, the Chinese will try to creep in and gain this. And I think he's been very successful in not only speaking out and saying what he intends to do, but also delivering on that message. In this regard, yes, he's a unique president. I mean, I live here in the region. I will talk, I'm sure, about this later. I've been interacting with leaders and prominent officials in countries in the Gulf. When I was National Security Advisor, I visited the UAE, not as many times as Washington, but these two were the main capitals that I interacted with. And, you hear their perception of whether or not they can really trust a level of commitment posed by the United States of America. Well, I think now they can. I think now they know that President Trump will put literally his money where his mouth is and will make sure that things will happen the way that he intends them to do. All the countries in the region, of course, hope that this will play out the way that President Trump intends this to play out. Everyone wants this to end when Iran can no longer pose a threat to them. This is true for Israel, but this is also true for the Emirates, for Bahrain, for Saudi Arabia, even Oman. I think even Qatar understand at the moment that they cannot put their bets on Iranian support will they need them after all the attack that they suffered.
And you were in office while Biden was the president, right?
Right? Yes.
Did you feel like it was a long process of trying to convince the U.S. that Iran is posing a threat to American citizens, or did they always know that this is an issue that should be taken care of?
Well, I interacted, as you say, with Biden administration. I was National Security Advisor for the previous Israeli government, Prime Minister Bennett, and then Prime Minister Lapid, from summer of 21 till the end of 2022. And I interacted with a different White House than we have now. To your point, I think there was a full understanding of the threat coming from Iran in that administration as well. I mean, we're talking about people who are experienced enough. They knew the region well. They were aware of not only the activity that Iran was doing, but also on the ambitions. There was no debate on whether or not Iran wanted, if they're given a chance, to get a nuclear weapon, for instance. Maybe there was questions about how long this will take and what will they do once they have it. But I think fundamentally, the analysis of the risk was there. I think the willingness to act, to intervene, to take risks, to try to prevent things from deteriorating, there was a chance there. There was a sense that a de-escalation is a strategy, that intervention is something that needs to be feared because of consequences, of unintentional consequences, a sense of aversion of risk. Now, again, I was not in a position then to tell them what the U.S. policy should be. This is always for an American administration to decide what kind of risks they're taking. My job as a national security advisor was to make sure they understand the Israeli position. And time and again, I told them, look, if we will need to deal with this ourselves, we will. The previous government in Israel laid a lot of foundation work, resources allocation, acquiring of capabilities that eventually allowed for the fulfillment of those campaigns on 12-day war. And now, I'm very proud of the role that I took personally, and of course that the previous government did in this. But to the point, I always told them, look, if push come to shove, Israel will need to act, because for us, this is serious. When Iran threatens to annihilate Israel and to erase us from the map of the Middle East, we take that seriously. And if Iran will have weapons of mass destruction, I don't want to be in a position where I ask myself, will they use it or not? They just can't have weapons of mass destruction, so they do not pose an existential threat to us as a country. I think this is a different perspective that we had with many of the American administrations, even in Trump 1, for that matter. Something is very different right now. And if I can say, as an Israeli and as a citizen of the Middle East, I'm very happy that this is the case. I'm very happy that President Trump and the administration are taking it really seriously and willing to do something to eliminate those risks.
I interviewed President Trump today over the phone, and he told me that he thinks it's going to be very hard, very tough for the son of Khamenei, Mojtaba Khamenei, who was just announced as the new supreme leader of Iran. It's going to be very tough for him to last. It's not going to be easy for him, as he told me again and again. And I want to ask you, first of all, of course, the U.S. and Israel has been threatening to take down whoever would like to replace Khamenei without the permission of the U.S. and Israel, without the understanding of a regime change. But do you think that there's a real change here? That there's a real chance here to change the regime?
So first, Neria, I think that I have to compliment you for the ability to interview President Trump directly.
Thank you so much.
Just putting
I
it out there.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Very good. But to the point, I think that the fact that Supreme Leader Khamenei is no longer there as Supreme Leader of Iran after holding the Iranian country and the Iranian people by the throat for 37 years in itself is very significant. The fact that the Iranians chose to appoint his son as his successor is telling, I think, to the level of fractures and anxiety and tension that they are in. I mean, the revolutionary regime replaced the monarchists. We are used to having a succession process from a king to the son in monarchies. This was not supposed to happen in this kind of a theocratic revolutionary regime. There was supposed to be a process where they choose the most prominent, wisest cleric, religious cleric, to lead this theocracy. Mojtaba is not the most prominent cleric in Iran. By the way, neither was his father, Khamenei. He was also elected in a set of circumstances. But to choose the son of the former supreme leader, I think this is something, and the radicals of Iran know this. They know that this is a problem. There is a reason why it took them so long to announce them. There was, I think, real debate in Iran of whether or not this is the right move. In any case, this is what they did. I have, many doubts about the ability of anyone to step into the shoes of Supreme Leader Khamenei. And, not that I want them to succeed, because I think that the people of Iran deserve a different regime, and I think that the Middle East as a whole in the world deserves.
Why is it so hard?
So he was very dominant, not only dominant by, I think, personality, but he also made sure that there will be no other channels or options for decision-making in Iran other than him. He was very centralist, and he made sure that, people that had the capacity would be either removed or completely subordinated and loyal to him and his ambitions, to a point where, and we know this for a fact, it was very hard to make serious decisions in Iran without the formal approval, even on things that you would expect that would be able to happen otherwise. This is very hard to replicate. There are many people surrounding the supreme leader that will no longer be there because they will never be as loyal to his son or to anyone else the way they were to him. And by the way, many of them have been eliminated either by us or by the United States. So first, there is no structure. That is, there's no cookbook, there's no playbook, there is no recipe of how to do this, and there is no culture and norm that was passed along the way. They're advisors, and they're very good. Ali Larijani is the top advisor at the moment, or was the top advisor to Supreme Leader Khamenei, and we've been informed that he opposed the appointment of Mojtaba as new supreme leader. I don't know how this will work out with his ability to advise Mojtaba. We'll have to wait and see. I would assume that he will be replaced, and a lot of knowledge will be lost. Now, add to that the fact that the initial conditions that he's having are not very good. The economic situation of Iran is bad, and now it's worse because, the war is doing a lot. But even before the war, the exchange rate of the Eyal, the Persian currency, the Iranian currency, was over 1 million Eyal per dollar, with an inflation that we don't see anywhere else in the world. There is shortage of water, there is shortage of electricity. The rate of unemployment is very high. Addiction to drugs all over. Iran is a very young population. And then add to that the support of the regime, even during his father's time, Ali Khamenei, was very small. The estimate was that maybe 80% of the people do not support the regime. First and foremost, because they're very young. And they haven't recognized anything else but that. And they know that their rights are deprived from them, right? This is true about women, but this is also true about men in Iran. They're not happy. They cannot exercise their talent this way. So he starts when he doesn't have, I think, the support from the surrounding leadership, a poor economic situation, a very bad engagement with the people and lack of support. And now he's also completely isolated. Because even the small amount of support that they would get from the countries around them, either because they were afraid or had a shared tactical interest, I think that his expectation must be that they will not support them. The ability to funnel money into through countries in the Gulf, I think, is going to be very, very limited. And even to try to mediate between them in the United States, either Bawanis or Qataris, I don't think they'll be easily doing this when they know that President Trump thinks that the leader of Iran is someone who shouldn't be on that seat. This is not going to work well for him. Can he survive? Maybe. We'll see.
We'll see. So Trump says it's going to be tough for him to last. So we'll see. When we talk about the Gulf countries, you just spoke about them. Tell me what you've been hearing, because you have a lot of people that you know there. You were in touch with them immediately after the Abraham Accords, and you're still in touch with them. And they're going through times that they haven't seen before. I mean, Israelis, you are, as we saw, you are used to going to the shelter. Unfortunately, when alarms are going off, they have no shelters, most of them, most of the citizens there. So tell me, or like the residents, tell me what they're going through. How do they see that? How do they feel about Iran attacking them?
So first, you're right, Naria, this is unprecedented to them. Some of those countries have been attacked before. The Saudis have been attacked in Abu Qaik in their oil facilities in the Trump 1 period. I think it was 2019. But this is one single attack on one single site. Emiratis have been attacked by the Houthis. I was National Security Advisor at the time, at the end of 21 and beginning of 22. A large attack, a lot of ballistic missiles and cruise missiles fired, Iranian weapons, but fired from the Houthis. That was traumatic to them. The Bahrainis have suffered Iranian or Shiite insurgency in their country before, but nothing like this magnitude. As you said, they don't have shelters. They don't have the facilities to do this. Their air defenses are good, provided by mostly the Americans. We help a little bit, I think, as well. But this is not indigenous to them. This is the first time they exercise this amount of air defense. And by the way, they're doing pretty well. Their interception rates are high. But this is hard. This is hard for the peoples of those countries, and also for the leadership. What I sense, and I interact with many of them, is a clear understanding that this is the real thing. This is where the masks are taken off. They always knew that if Iran would have an opportunity, they might do something like this. And this is why they try to hedge all the time and try to prevent Iran from having an excuse to do this. And here it is. It's happening. What they feared is happening. I think there is a mixed sense, first, of success, the ability to withstand those attacks and to maintain not only their position and leadership, but also to protect their people through the air defenses that they've acquired and operated in conjecture and collaboration with the Americans, of course. This is, I think, one significant thing. And the second thing is there's a sense of jointness. There's a sense that this is not, it is very clear that Iran has made itself an enemy to a joint array of countries all across the GCC, also with us. And they know this. They've always known this. They just didn't want this to materialize. And again, and they're suffering a lot. They should get credit for the losses that they're getting and their ability to be resilient. It's hard for them to respond the way we do. I'm not judgmental on this. Israel is we know how to do this, and we've exercised
There's a lot of
this
experience.
very, very well.
Yeah,
a lot of experience, but also I think a sense of urgency and need to defend ourselves by ourselves and to fight our enemies by ourselves. This is not their narrative. This is not their culture. This is not how they do this. And I'm not judgmental about this. I think what's important...
By the way, I think Iran thought that they would resist. I mean, they would try to resist that operation once they're being attacked, and they're not really doing that. They're pretty supportive of Israel and the U.S.
Yeah, I think first the Iranian thinking was if they threaten the GCC, then they in turn will make sure that President Trump does not do this, because they will make him understand that this is not in their best interest, hence not in his best interest. That did not happen. They were reporting that when Sheikh Khalid bin Salman, the brother of Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, came to Washington, his message, that's what reported, the message to the Americans was, if you do this right. And if you can do this, and if you can rid of this enemy, then do this properly. This is not the message the Iranians were wishing, I think, for him to give. And after they attacked him, if they had this maybe naive kind of sense that they will immediately call Trump in panic, President Trump in panic, and tell him, you have to stop. No, they didn't do this. On the contrary, they stood firm, they defended their people, they supported the United States, they supported Israel. And at the moment, the outcome of this is that they're all aligned in blaming Iran for the consequences, even though they've been collateral damage to a war that didn't initiate and maybe didn't even want. But they understand the true nature of Iran. They always knew it. Now it's just revealed to everyone.
And can you tell me also a bit about MBS? When we talk about Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudis initially did not think the war is the best solution. But then, as long as the process got longer, they understood that it may be good to try and change the regime with an operation. So, how do they perceive that?
Well, I think
They're
the
being
Saudi
attacked. We should say that.
right, they're being attacked, as you say, and it is very clear that the Saudi in particular, Saudi Arabia in particular, are enclaved in many different constraints. Being the leader of the Gulf as a whole, they're expected by their people and by the countries around them to lead the way, and also their relationship with Washington is the strongest and definitely the most important of the other countries. And I think that it's very difficult for the Saudis to do this. I think that, as you said before, there are conflicting interests and also conflicting messaging there. If we listen carefully, I think there is some kind of criticism and resentment within Saudi Arabia people over this. Where is this going? How long will this last? They're not enjoying yet the rise of oil prices as one expect that they will. I think they're more in anxiety of how this will play out. But by and large, I think the Saudis understand the opportunity that is here. From an Israeli perspective, my hope is that when this ends, and with Iran, even if they're just degraded because they have a weak regime, as we said before, definitely if there is regime change, I think and hope that there will be conditions again to reignite the process of normalization and bringing together closer Israel and Saudi Arabia. This is a vision. I hope that it can be fulfilled, but this is definitely something that is important, I think, to the region as a whole, definitely for Saudi Arabia and for Israel.
Yeah, because I think that normalization with Saudi Arabia is something that Israel really wants. But the Saudis were not happy with the way Prime Minister Netanyahu and his coalition has been acting since, I would say, like, not since October 7th, but like about a year after October 7th. And they were about to go to do the normalization before the 7th. It was pretty close. And in the past few months, they were not happy, not with Netanyahu and not with his coalition, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. So do you think that this could happen?
So, I think at this point, when Israel is so close to an election, the possibility that this will happen before the election is very small in my mind. And you're right, there is personal elements in this, but also, I think, policy and ideological elements. This Israeli government, we must admit to ourselves, is indeed the most extreme of the governments we had in Israel before. Not very appealing to the pragmatic Arab countries around us to put things together when there's talk about annexation in the air all the time and policies that are just very hard for them, not only to explain to their people, but, and sorry for the noise, these are alarms that might happen soon here. So I think that the chances that this will happen before an Israeli election is very small.
You have an alarm going off there?
No, we're good.
Oh, okay.
But it might. I think the chances of this materializing before the elections are not significant. But when the political dust will settle, definitely when the war will settle, when there is progress, and there will be progress in the 20-point plan of President Trump in Gaza, and hopefully some stability also in that arena, I believe that the shared interests will again prevail. I hope that there will be trust again between Saudi leadership, pragmatic Arab leadership as a whole, and Jerusalem when there is a new government of any sort there. I think this is important. This is important for Israel. This is important for the region. And yes, of course, I speak as an Israeli. Naturally, I think that we need more realistic and pragmatic policies as it comes to the region. We cannot be as extreme as we were in this government, but this is a political question and for the Israeli electorate to decide, and we'll see what will be the results after the elections. One way or another, I think that there will be, again, options of promoting normalization after the elections in Israel.
Before we conclude, how do you see this war with Iran ends?
Well, I think it's hard to say. We get reportings of different sorts from Washington all the time, and I put this there because I think ultimately
Trump
it's very
just said,
clear.
by the way, I think the war in Iran is very complete.
Yeah, so I think the reason it's important to put a spotlight on this is because President Trump decided that the war starts, and President Trump will decide when the war ends. When there are sufficient gains for him to be able to project, and truthfully, right, this is not just a narrative, because there were a lot of gains already, then the war will end. Of course, as an Israeli, I would want this to happen when there is either a different regime or a good chance that there will be a different regime. I wouldn't want this war to end when the regime survives and then continues to defies President Trump, and there is no solution of any sort to the problems of the nuclear program and the missile program and all the rest. But I have to say, being in this region, and I've been put there this all the time. I think the commitment of President Trump for resolving this problem by a host of means is sincere. I want this war to end with a concrete achievement, but I'm
But
confident that regardless,
we can understand that the oil thing, the prices of the oil, it's a lot of pressure on President
yeah,
Trump, and
yeah,
this might be a reason for him to try and rush this.
and this might be true. I think on the same note, he is also acknowledging the gains that were already made, and maybe he knows what we do not. I'm not in the circles of intelligence. That the conditions for a change in Iran is also close. I mean, I'm sure that he's getting the feed of it. I wouldn't want this war to end with a regime in Iran that continues to defy President Trump, the West as a whole, and us, and also the region. I think that the regime is weakened, as I said before, and let's see how this ends. At the same note, I have to say that even if there was an interview today that he said that, this doesn't mean that the war will end necessarily tomorrow or the next day. We need to be open to all of these options. And what I suggest by that is that both parties, Israel, the United States, on the militaries, on the intelligence levels, and the policymakers, will use the time as best that they can. We'll work with the priorities to make sure that we make the most important achievements in the short period of time, just given the circumstance and the possibility that this will end sooner than we all might either want or believe that this will end.
Very interesting. Eyal Hulata, former national security advisor for Israel. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Nelia.
Thank you so much for joining the Kraus Report. If you like this episode, please click subscribe and join us.